Well, looks like there is a major change included in the update 1.04 for Elden Ring, and this is going to actually change the game quite a bit in a way that I did not expect. So the biggest thing here in this entire update is that many things actually got like increased and made stronger and buffed and made way better. Whereas only a few things were like brought down a notch and made a bit weaker because they were a bit too strong to begin with. So we're actually looking at a lot more buffs and making a lot more weapons viable with this update. While I'm not going to go into specifics, there is a link in the description to show you the entire patch notes of a bunch of text, which is pretty much for like unique individual weapons. I just want to mention out specific ones and different groups. Like for example, colossal greatswords and colossal weapons in general, the big weapons, they have a faster attack speed, they have a lower recovery time. Now this doesn't affect their jump attack. They have their two-handed attack damage, dealing more damage, so you're going to feel a lot more like heavy hits using this weapon just in general. You'll also be able to block more damage using this weapon when you use the block feature. One giant nerf that we can see here is that the decreased effect of the Great Shield Talisman for weapons and high block rate shields has been, decreased, so that you're not going to be out there with the fingerprint shield blocking 100% of the damage without taking, any stamina loss or health loss or anything. You're actually going to end up having to, have a little bit of a drawback now instead of just being able to wall everything. The Madness Affliction animation has been shortened, so when you have Madness afflicted on you, it's not going to take so long where an enemy can just smack you around. It's going to be a lot quicker. They've also lowered the speed of Madness build-up recovery, so you can't recover your Madness as fast. We've also had a slight increase to FP and stamina growth rates at lower levels. Now, to actually have this work, all you have to do is level up just once, activate Godric's Great Rune, or just re-equip any equipment or talisman that grants a bonus stat to like strength, dexterity, or any of your things, just so that it changes your stats. It will kind of like afflict the new change to occur with all of your stats entirely. And there have been plenty of enemy and weapon balance changes in the game. They don't go into specifics there about the enemies, but they talk about a lot of sorceries and incantations that have been basically increased in cast speed time, as well as decreased in recovery speed time. Now, there is a giant list that I'm not going to go through one by one. You can check them in the link in the description down below, but a lot of them basically are just going to be faster and have less recovery time so that you can keep doing them without being open and, able to get hits in the meantime. Things like Rani's Dark Moon or Renala's Full Moon have been made a lot more effective, so that you don't have to stand there casting for too long. You can actually, get a cast off in a reasonable amount of time. This means we're getting viable access to spells in different categories that are going to work on the same level of other spells that we're so used to seeing. I think this is going to change a lot of how the game is going to be played, especially since it opens up so many different types of playstyles. Now, if we talk about the major kind of like downward adjustments or things that have been nerfed and like changed, we have Adula's Moonblade that doesn't have the extreme power of that single cast that hits so hard. It's a little bit weaker now, but they have made it so that the blades and the frost hit more consistently and continuously as they're going through enemies, and you can actually cast faster at lower dexterity. That's an interesting thing there. We have the Flame Fall Upon Them, which has decreased its damage. We have the Howl of Shabiri, which decreased the madness buildup on the enemy. And we were expecting it. The Swarm of Flies has decreased blood loss buildup on the enemy. Now, that's obviously something that's, you can imagine, was coming for a while, because it was a little too broken, because it kind of staggers enemies and blood loss builds them, a little too easily without you actually having to do any worry at all. The Flame of Frenzy and Frenzy Burst also have decreased madness buildup on enemies. Now, in terms of weapon skills like Ashes of War, now across the board here, we're looking at increased cast speed, increased, recovery speed and recovery time and different things like that. So you can check in the description down below. A lot of these have been increased. Like my specific favorite one here would be like Gravitas, which is that gravity pull-in thing that is increased cast speed, so it costs quicker, which is fantastic. The Black Flame Tornado has a hitbox to the weapon, so when you're spinning it, you can actually hit weapons or hit enemies when they're near you, so that's much better than you just kind of standing there, and if an enemy hits you, it's like, well, okay, I'm going to stop casting now, you're not even going to hit the enemy even though you're spinning a giant spear in their face. This also works for the Ice Spear as well. And in general, a ton of things were increased, which is fantastic. I'm loving it. This opens up so many different things to do and experience. The only major kind of decrease to anything here is the Thundercloud form, which has decreased damage when not charged. It also has a decreased FP cost, so an increased cost speed. So it's more of a buff and a logical change than it is to a nerf. But yeah, for Ashes of War, that's kind of it what they mention. It's basically all increases across the board. Now, there are a ton of bug fixes here that, affect like online multiplayer, where it makes multiplayer a lot better, and also like fixed a few things that people were kind of like glitching, like where they were transferring or trading unauthorized items to other players, which they weren't allowed to do. They fixed a few things with bosses and enemies that weren't working as intended, like invaders, or like, certain things not happening when you do a boss fight, or things not dropping appropriately when you like defeat certain kind of NPCs. The most major change here is increased online multiplayer stability in general, as well as a bunch of improvements and bug fixes to the game. And that's it for update 1.04. This changes the game in a good way. Everything basically got buffed. We literally only saw like 4, maybe 5 nerfs, whereas we got like maybe 50 plus buffs, which are fantastic. However, we don't know if there have been some silent nerfs that they haven't mentioned. There was no mention of weapons like Rivers of Blood, which people consider overpowered, or the Moonveil kind of like mage build. Those seem to be left untouched. Everything else, however, has been increased, so we're going to be seeing some differences. Things that were slower or not as effective before might be a whole lot stronger now, so it's going to be interesting to see how that all works out. I hope you guys enjoyed this patch note. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and thank you so much for watching. Please enjoy the game further.